We have been talking about simplifying radicals. All right. And of course, we have been doing this at school, and we have been doing the square root of 9, which we all know is 3. We've been doing this because 3 times 3 is 9. And if I do the square root of 49, it's 7, because we know 7 times 7 is 49. All right, and then we've even done square root of 12, which we know is 4 times 3, and that gives you 2 and 2, so there's a pair of 2's, and the 3 is by itself, so it's going to stay in, okay? All right, and so we've been simplifying all those. All right, but now the real question, because this is what our real lesson today is how to simplify a square root when you have a negative number underneath. Let's go with the square root of 25. I want to point out that this is not the same as negative the square root of 25. Two different animals we're talking about. All right, so the one on the right, this one, is basically just like we've been doing. You take the negative out front, you actually take the square root of 25, which we all know is 5, and your answer is negative 5. However, on the square root of negative 25, you might think, well, that's just negative 5. However, if you go back to the concept, remember I said square root of 9 was 3 times 3, right? Well, if you go back to that same concept and you might want to say, well, negative 5 times negative 5. But negative 5 times negative 5 is not negative 25. It would be a positive 25. And then of course, if you did, let's see, whoa, didn't mean to do that, but we'll handle it. And that, if you go back to the negative 25, and let's go with the fact that it's not going to be negative 5 times negative 5. That won't work. And then, obviously, it's not 5 times 5. That's still positive 25. So that's not going to work. And it's got to be the same number. So, therefore, there is something that we're going to use. And we're going to use something called complex numbers. All right, which is imaginary numbers. So we're going to use the letter I, and that's for imaginary numbers. The letter I is equal, this is important, say this like 5 times before you get out of bed in the morning. That's your homework. But the I stands for the square root of negative 1, because it's the negative that we're having issues with. So what you're going to do is basically you're going to take out the negative 1, and then it becomes like this. All right, if this right here, you notice I just said was the same thing as I. So in other words, we're going to replace that with an I. And then we're going to take the square root of 25 just like we always have. And that would be that. But of course, normally, we write the variable afterwards. Even though I is not technically a variable, it's kind of acting as a variable. So we're going to do 5I, and that's your answer. Okay? All right, everybody got that? All right, good. I'll give you a second because I know you were writing down some notes to go along with it. So let's try another one. All right, let's make my handwriting just a little bit bigger. So let's try square root of negative 81. Okay, remember, you said it 5 times, didn't you already? That would be equals square root of negative 1. So we're going to rewrite this. You don't actually have to rewrite this every time, but for the sake of trying to make you understand where it's coming from, I'm going to. So the square root of negative 1, that's your I. And then the square root of 81 is 9. So again, we don't really write like that. We're going to say 9I, and that is your answer. All right. Again, I equals the square root of negative 1. All right. So everybody's getting this. All right. I'm sure everybody's got that written down now. Let's try another. Let's try square root of negative 20. Same idea. Remember, I equals what? Right, I thought I heard it. Negative square root of negative 1. All right, so we're going to rewrite this like this. So the square root of negative 1 is your I. The square root of 20, you're going to simplify it just like you've been doing it. Either you're going to break it down, like 4 times 5, break down 4 into 2 and 2. You got a pair of 2's. That's one way. So you're going to have a pair of 2's. And then the 5 is by itself, so it stays in. Now, so really you've got all this, but remember the 2 really goes first, so you're going to do 2i on the square root of 5. That should be your final answer right there for this. Basically, anytime you have a negative number under the square root, you're going to have an I in your answer. Okay? All right, let's try another one. Let's try square root of negative 45. All right, so I've got negative. Guess what time that is? Can y'all hear the clock going? Yes, it is 10 o'clock at night, and I'm trying to do this video. All right, but so we got negative 1 and times the square root of 45. So the square root of negative 1 is I, and then you got square root of 45. All right, square root of 45. I'm going to do it, instead of doing factors, you can do your factors and do like 5 times 9, break down 9, and you got 3 and 3, you got a pair of 3's. All right, but this time I'm going to do it my way that I normally do it, because a few of you do it this way. And I'm going to say, what's the perfect square that goes into 45? That would be 9. And then 9 times 5. So I still got my I. Don't forget about it. We know the square root of 9 is 3, because that's where that pair of 3's came from over here. So you're going to have 3I. I'm just going to go ahead and rewrite it all together like that. On the square root of 5. Again, don't write your I out here. That's like a no-no. Always put it right here in front of the square root. All right, so your final answer for the square root of negative 45 is 3i on the square root of 5. Final answer. Any questions, comments, concerns? All right, I'm not hearing any. So make sure you let me know if you got some. So, again, I'm just going to remind you of something. I asked you about this a second ago, but we were going to compare these two. Make sure you see a difference where the negative is. This one will not have an I. Why? That's right, I thought I heard it. Because the negative is not in the square root. So that's simply going to be 4. You still got the negative, so that's just negative 4. No I, because the square root's not negative inside. This one, though, has a square root that is negative inside. So therefore, it's kind of like you're having to rewrite it like this animal. So square root of negative 1 is your I. Square root of 16 is 4. So again, we're going to write it as 4I. Final difference. Final answer. You see, your answers are not the same, and nor that where that negative is makes a big difference. All right. So let's do another one. If you got any questions, write them down. Please send me an email or a message and say, hey, where in the world did you get this? Explain to me again how you got that answer. I'll be glad. I love teaching some folks when they want to listen. All right. So I got my next one right here. We did a few the other day. We're going to do, normally we go ahead and do outside times outside, inside times inside. But when you're working with a complex number like this, it's best to go ahead and take care of that negative first. So therefore, this is going to become I on the square root of 6. You can't break down 6 right now, so I'm just going to bring down the 5. So you're going to take care of that first. Okay? Now I'm going to bring down 8 on the square root of 2. That one wasn't a problem, didn't have any negatives. Now I'm going to multiply outside with outside. That's going to give me 40i. Inside with inside, which is going to give me, that's inside with inside, which is going to give me the square root of 12. All right, now, so now don't say you're finished. We still need to say, can I break down 12? And the answer is, oh, yes, it can. That's 4 times 3 and 2 times 2. You got a pair of 2's. So that's going to become, we still got 40i. We got 2, because we had the pair of 2's, on the square root of 3. That was left. It's going to stay. Last thing, take this, go ahead and simplify it. Ooh, I didn't mean to do that. Where in the world? Okay, that's going to give me 80 eyes. 80 eyes probably means about 40 people, doesn't it? So that's going to be 80i on the square root of 3. Final answer. All right, anybody got a question? I'll give you a couple of seconds if you were writing it down or wanted to. If not, everybody's got it? All right, I don't hear anybody saying wait, so I'm going to keep going on. All right, so I got a couple of more. Just hang on tight. And I got 5 on the square root of negative 18 times 7 on the square root of negative 8. All right, now, once again, you need to take care of these negatives first. You need to take care of the negatives first, because you're going to see in just a second this animal is going to be a little different. All right, so that means, first of all, I'm going to break this down. It's going to become I'm going to have negative 1 square root of 18. Square root of 18 is really going to be 9 and 2. So therefore I've got 5. I've got an I. That's going to give me 3. And then the 2 is going to stay in there. So now that looks like a funky animal, but that's really 5 times I times 3, which used to be 15i on the square root of 2. All right, so that's what I got. All that junk comes just from the first one. And I'm going to be multiplying it in a second by this one. We need to simplify. That's going to give me square root of negative 1, square root of 8, which is going to give me, I'm going to bring that down. That's going to give me 7. That's going to give me an I. This right here is going to be 4 times 2. I'm going to do it my way where I use perfect squares. You can break it down. The square root of 4 is going to be 2, which means if you were doing your little prime factorization, you would have a pair of 2's, and that's where that came from. That 2, you'd have a 2 left over right here. That's a multiplying sign, not a negative right there. All right, so therefore, I'm multiplying all 3 of those, and that gives me 14i on the square root of 2. Now, ooh, I didn't even know this was fixing to happen. All right, good. I'm fixing to multiply. And now I'm going to multiply outside with outside. So I'm going to do 14 times 15. Anybody know what that is? Well, let's see. Well, 15 times 15, I don't have my calculator with me. So 15 times 15 is 225. But it's not 15 times 15, it's 15 times 14. So that means we're short of 15, aren't we? So I'm going to subtract that, and that's going to be 210. I hope that's right. Somebody let me know if I'm not. Anybody got a calculator? All right, I think I'm right. All right, so now I'm going to do I times I. Now, usually what's x times x? Used to be x squared, right? Well, I times I is going to be I squared. All right, and then that's going to give me the square root. Let's see. If I do square root of 2 times square root of 2, that's going to give me the square root of 4. Everybody agree? All right, good, good, good. This is kind of being a little funky here, but we're going to be able to handle it. All right, so we got the 210. Now, if we were in class and up on my board, when I have the standards posted, you would see in the very first standard, it says, first of all, we know I equals the square root of negative 1. Okay? So when you have I squared, it is negative 1. That little part, like you said that 5 times before you got out of bed, you're going to say this 5 times as you're walking to the kitchen to get something to drink. All right, so I squared equals negative 1. So that means I squared is going to completely go away, and you're going to use a negative 1 for it. Now, the square root of 4 is 2. So we're going to multiply all that. So I've got 210 times -1 times 2. And anybody know the final answer? Why, yes, it is -420. All right, everybody agreeing? Anybody got a question? So the main thing with this problem is making sure you realize that when your negatives are in the house, you need to take care of those and get your I with it first. You need to handle that and not just say -18 times -8 is a positive whatever and get rid of it. That's not going to happen. If you do, you're going to get 420 as your answer, but you're going to miss the negative, and therefore you're going to be wrong. Kind of like my checking account being 420 versus -420. The bank definitely cares. All right. I told you I had 2 more, so that means I got 1 more. This one's not nearly as long and nearly as complicated. But some of you are not going to like it. Why? Oh, yeah. Because it got a fraction. All right, so, but the fraction's not that bad. So what we're going to do, when you have a fraction, basically you just take the fractions and take the fraction, split it apart. Do the square root of the top, numerator, and the square root of the denominator. So, therefore, on the bottom, remember, on that negative, you only put it in one spot. You don't put it in both. So I'm just going to leave it with the 9. So on the top, we got the square root of 9. Remember, what's the negative do? Oh, yes, it gives me an I. Square root of 9 is going to give me 3. And don't forget your I. So I got 3I. Square root of 25 is still 5. And that's all you have to do. So it's 3/5 I. You could put the I on top, or like if you were on a standardized test, they probably would write it like this. That's what it would look like. But that's how you handle a fraction, all right? So I'm going to be sending out some problems for you to practice with simplifying with the radicals with negatives. Basically the same concept. You just got to take care of the negative. Remember, I'll write it down one more time because I know that you're going to want to write it in your notebook. I equals the square root of -1. I squared equals -1. These are important little somethings to have in your toolbox. All right. Hope y'all have a great day, and I'll be talking with you just a little bit later.